are your preferred options in this. So let's talk about funding for this. Number one, Delegate Vivian wants to introduce HB 2085 that we will get done this time around to restore the lost MBTA money that was shifted away because Dan Helmer's predecessor screwed it up over in Centerville. That will never happen again. We will never, ever, ever allow something like that, something so poorly mismanaged to happen again to this Commonwealth where we've lost our ability to do the 678 hybrid over in Centerville because of this. And number two on this, I'm going to continue working to make sure that we can pass one of the largest transportation funding bills that we can that deal with secondary and primary non-interstate highway improvements, specifically around intersection designs to make them safer and quicker for everyone, no matter where you live and come from.
Your response specifically on transportation funding bills, please.
All right, absolutely. So I will start first by, I would be remiss if I don't recognize your new president, Pastor Lyons. I'm proud to call him my very own pastor, so congratulations. I haven't had that opportunity to tell you that, and I'm so proud. I'm sure we are in great hands now. And transportation, so I will go back to 2017 after I won my first election, and I actually met with PRTC, and I am a co-sponsor of the bill that provided during the first year the money that we are using now for all of the expansion the director was talking about earlier. So, but there's more to come. I'm glad to hear that there are priorities now in Bell City and in the eastern side of the county, and everything that we could do to secure that funding as well. We talked to the chairman right here, so I'm sure he'll be on board on that. So coming up, transportation. So we have a couple of things happen in my district, and I represent parts of Fauquier and parts of Prince William County, and I held numerous town halls working with VDOT, where we actually get rid of the humps on Route 29, going not from Her Market, but in the Bean Hill area. On Montclair, we are working with VDOT because by the Henderson Elementary School, we had a lot of accidents and that happened, so we met with VDOT, and we are putting additional pedestrian lines and stop signs and speed limit signs on waterway. Coming up, we have a study that was left many years ago on the Route 1 corridor for the expansion of the yellow line. The result of that study was to create a bus rapid transportation system along the Route 1 corridor. Unfortunately, that study ended in Woodbridge. So we wanted to retake that conversation and be able to look at more different types of transportation, maybe in bus rapid transit that will not stop in Occoquan, but actually go to Occoquan, Rincon Landing, and the Quantico Bays. And with that, we know that Metro will not happen overnight. It's a long-term goal, but we are all on board to bring more public transportation to Prince William County. We shouldn't be proud of being the worst bottleneck in this country, and I think that we will work really hard to take that out of Prince William County. Thank you.
Mark's that he's holding on. Brian?
Good morning, everyone. I take a different perspective than my colleagues. I have been in the House for 10 years and have seen a lot of legislation come forward. And the reason I take a different perspective on transportation, obviously there's work to be done in the Northern Virginia area. What we're going to see in Richmond this year, we're going to see a lot of bills. And we'll take those bills and we will prioritize those bills along with the appropriate funding. The number one issue, in order to address transportation issues, infrastructure, and other issues, will be the level of funding that we have. We will take those bills of legislation, what the delegates are proposing, and we will work with the Department of Transportation, again, to prioritize and assign dollars to the various needs. Obviously, we're going to be looking very closely at North Virginia and the challenges that we have here in North Virginia. We'll have a big task before us because we'll have 100 members coming to us and appropriations for all of their requests. And the way we will do it, we will prioritize those requests and try to meet them as best that we can. hopefully we will get our study done for Metro as well. We've been working on that for 10 years. I think we have the numbers now that we can at least get a study done, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you.
I'm so excited to be here with you guys. I'm Dan Helmer. I'm the Delegate-Elect for parts of Prince William and Fairfax counties. And excited to be here. I'm the only Iraq or Afghanistan veteran in the majority, and also one of the few folks who runs a small business. Prior to getting involved in elected politics, I advised Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. government while working in the Boston Consulting Group. And these days, I have 3 partners. We run a 35-person firm that works in 5 states right now, advising small and medium-sized businesses in the U.S. government as well as some state agencies. So when I come to you and say I'm very interested in working with businesses in Prince William County, I come from that from a position of a person who is deeply interested both at a large level, but as somebody who does it every day. When I think about transportation here, I do think it's time that we stop thinking small and started thinking big. The reality is that our lack of great infrastructure and multimodal transportation that gets us more quickly to our places of business is both a tax on us as businesses. It drives up the cost and the difficulty in attracting great talent to our businesses. It also keeps us away from our families. And so it is going to take a new era of thinking. We made a first step in November by electing a pro-transportation majority who's going to prioritize funding multimodal transportation. Our next step is to think regional, to make sure that we're thinking about all of the impacts, to provide new and creative thinking that do things like prioritize teleworking, incentivize teleworking, that incentivize transportation other than with your car, that doesn't think that every single time you expand a road, you're going to get less traffic, because there's a lot of data that shows that's not the case. And so it's time for us to look at a broader variety of solutions, to look at them across the region, and to be aggressive about how we think about funding and how that reduces our carbon footprint, and we increase new businesses that help us think both about transportation and energy diversification and create that kind of economy here in Northern Virginia.
As the House Appropriations Committee Chair, and congratulations. I'll start with you. We understand that Senator Sasslaw has already introduced Senate Bill 7, a piece of legislation that will incrementally increase the minimum wage in Virginia from $7.25 to $15 over the course of 5 years. What is your position on increasing the minimum wage? Is this a bill you would support should it cross over? And if so, how would you address the financial burdens doing so may place on the back of small businesses, which are the lifeblood of our community?
I believe the minimum wage needs to be increased progressively, not all at one time. Because one thing that we cannot afford to do, we cannot afford to hurt our small businesses. But when you have a minimum wage that's been at $7.25 for a number of years, for a long time, there has to be, something has to be done. And I think that, I'll take a look at Senator Saslaw's legislation. If it makes sense to me, then I'll support it. But we need to know that we have a problem. The minimum wage needs to be addressed, but not on the backs of hurting small businesses. We have to be very strategic. If we're going to do this thing, we have to be very strategic in how it's done, and bring all the stakeholders into the room, give them the voice, so that we keep our economy growing.
So I will start by looking at the Code of Virginia. What is the definition of a small business? According to the Code of Virginia, a small business is 250 employees. So I would like to start by changing that, because I think that all of these benefits and advantages that are out there for small businesses are not being taken advantage, because we have to change that now. So I want everybody to have in mind that according to the law of Virginia, a small business is the one with 250 employees. Second of all, as an immigrant myself who struggled 3 jobs to make ends meet, I definitely have to change, because the result of this is that children are suffering by not having their parents at home. And I have many of those in my district. It breaks my heart when I knock on doors on a weekend and I see these children by themselves at home. And I ask them where mom and dad are, and they are both working. So that tells me that we have to change. Now, I'm sure many of you, because I have spoken with many of you, and nobody in this room pay their employees $7.25. We know that. So we have to find a way to make the right thing. I haven't read Senator Sasso's bills, but I will second what Delegate Torian said. We will definitely have to change it. We have to find a pathway to change the lives of Virginians. We are the second wealthiest state in the country, so we have to take care of our workforce as well. And I would say that will go on alignment with what you are talking about, job retention. So because if an employee is treated well, they will stay with your organization. So we have to take a look at things, not how things are gonna be hurt, but actually how they're gonna improve businesses. Thank you.
Just by a show of hands, can someone here tell me if they know what the minimum wage is in West Virginia? $8.75 an hour. We are at $7.25, the federal minimum in Virginia. Can someone here in this room please tell me what part of West by God, Virginia has a higher cost of living than anywhere in Northern Virginia? How is that conscionable that we've allowed this to happen? It's not. The fact of the matter is we have to get this done. And here's a reality check as well. When I had my first job working right down the street over here at Fitzner Stadium for the Potomac Canyons at the time, I was making $5.15 an hour as a 15-year-old working in the year 2000. When I transitioned and I found myself 1 for 35 in my job search in my 30s, I took a side job for $5 an hour plus tip. And this is in 2016, $5 an hour plus tip, delivering kebabs over in Arlington. And every person I worked with was an adult. And the thing is, a lot of those folks had accents like Elizabeth. It is wildly important that if we are truly going to take care of our minority majority community here in Prince William County and throughout Northern Virginia, that we give our immigrant constituents the full benefits of society here, while at the same time, we recognize that the fallacy that the minimum wage is only somehow pegged to teenagers coming up is wrong. It's not based on any vetted fact whatsoever, and it's certainly not based on the lived experience that I had at age 32. And I had that job right before I decided to run for office. Let's just make sure that as we're doing this, yes, we can do this incrementally. You know, we don't have to have an immediate shock to the system overnight. At the same time, let's make sure that when we're boasting about how Virginia is the best state for business, that we stop being the 51st state/city in DC for workers. We should also be the best state for workers as well. And frankly, if you're going to be the best state for business, you have to be the best state for your workers to want to be there in the first place.
Thanks, I agree with my colleagues. Look, the jury's in. The predicted devastating consequences of a $15 minimum wage that we've heard fear-mongering about time and again have not borne fruit in the places that have instituted a $15 minimum wage. A $15 minimum wage is $30,000 a year in salary. I would argue that still puts somebody in significant risk of, not in risk, they will be in poverty in Northern Virginia. And so, who are we talking about earning $15 minimum wage? We're talking about a woman I spoke to on the doors as I was running for office, who was working in a preschool and had to take on multiple jobs. This is someone who was taking care of our children, who just to stay in her home had to take on multiple jobs because she was getting paid $9 an hour. We are talking about a huge majority of our veterans who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan after they leave the military. So by being intransigent against raising the minimum wage, you're condemning those who've served our country to live in poverty after they return from their service to our country. So it is incredibly important that we get to a $15 minimum wage, that we index it for inflation, that we are responsible in our approach to ensure that we don't impact businesses, both small and large, in ways that devastate our economy. But I am excited to work with a Chamber of Commerce that takes a new approach to thinking about the upsides of getting to a $15 minimum wage, the economic growth that we can spur through a $15 minimum wage, and not just about the potential downsides that haven't borne fruit in places where we've instituted such minimum wage.
Thank you all, and I hope the audience is taking some notes and has some questions for you all based on those comments. We'll go on to the next question. Delegate Guzman, you've been a staunch advocate for expanding Medicaid and addressing the rising cost of healthcare. Many have called for the creation of multiple employer welfare arrangements or consortium health plans to expand access to healthcare benefits for small businesses, similar to the larger counterparts. Banks and private universities are examples of these successful consortiums. What's your opinion on such legislation?
I think it's a great idea. You know, we have to find ways to incentivize some people providing more benefits. There's a couple of things I'm talking about healthcare. We actually want to recognize Centara. We organized a maternal health care town hall a couple of months ago, which was a great success. It was an excellent experience for us just to learn and talk to moms. What is the experience like when they are having children? There are some numbers that are definitely shocking to many of us when we're looking at maternal health mortality, and we see that actually women of color are the ones who are dying while they are giving birth. So we definitely want to work together to address those needs. I have a couple of bills that are on the final stage yet, so I will not talk to them about yet, but it's addressing maternal health care. But I'm definitely in support of finding those resources to help these businesses take advantage of the benefits that are out there in healthcare.
So the number one healthcare priority that I have right now in the 13th district is making sure that all 3,800 of my constituents who are eligible for Medicaid expansion are enrolled. And I can tell you right now that the latest data that's come in as of November 15th shows that we have now enrolled more than 343,000 Virginians who are uninsured or underinsured last year, who now have quality, affordable health care this year, and we got it done in less than a year since enrollment began on January 1st. And the reality that goes along with that is that this is going to be open for 400,000 Virginians. That means that we've still got more work to do. We still have thousands more people in the greater Prince William area who are still eligible. We've now enrolled just under 13,000 people just in Prince William County. And when I'm looking at a little tiny city like Manassas Park with 491 people, that's a really, really big deal. But I also know we've got another 800 some odd folks who live in Manassas Park who are still eligible. And so that's going to be my top healthcare priorities, making sure that my chief of staff, Gigi's here, as well as myself, continue the robust constituent service that we've had to make sure that we're enrolling our eligible constituents in the first place, while at the same time, I'll make sure that the folks who are counting the dollars in the appropriations committee in Delegate Torian's case, or who are setting the incoming revenue in Delegate Watts' case, are going to be the ones who are basically figuring out what do we have the money for within the Commonwealth to either help with small businesses in terms of expanding their ability to fully insure their employees, or at the same time figuring out what sort of holes can small businesses put themselves into that at the same time don't undermine the Affordable Care Act. Because that's one of the big things that's happened in Richmond, is we see a lot of legislation about healthcare that seems designed to be nice, and then what we really find out about it is it's meant to pull away healthy people, and it's meant to pull away people who keep premiums down within our exchange rate. So it's wildly important that we have a good balance between making sure that we can take care of our employees and at the same time that we keep the ACA as robust as we can.
So this is one where my partners and I put our money where our mouth is. I believe strongly that every single Virginian should have access to quality, affordable health care. We as a business pay 90% of the premiums, which is the maximum we can under Commonwealth law, a platinum health plan for every single single one of our employees. As many of you know who run businesses here, the auxiliary benefits and overhead of running a business means that in many cases, right now, for each employee, 50% of, 50, our rack rate is 50% above the salary for every single employee, and probably will increase over time. So I am very much concerned about the cost of healthcare. Now, when it comes to group healthcare plans, we're allowing multiple businesses to group together in order to purchase insurance. On its face, it makes sense. Traditionally, the way we've approached driving down costs for these plans, though, is by allowing insurers to deny benefits, to removing things that we commonly covered elsewhere from these plans and driving down costs that way. That I don't support. If we can make sure that the coverage within these plans is as robust as coverage would be on ACA compliant plans, I think there's a lot that can be done there. And I think collectively, we do need to take an approach as a business community that demands that we look at the cost side of healthcare, how healthcare is being marketed, what insurance companies are doing to drive the premiums. As many of you know, the ACA capped the amount of profit that you could, what you could do on non-healthcare expenses, which then removed any incentive that health insurance companies had to control costs. The way they maintain their profits today is by expanding the cost of healthcare so they can have healthy, even though the profit margin is staying the same, the amount of profit they're making is growing larger. There's lots of players in the healthcare marketplace that have collectively worked together to drive up costs, each of which is acting rationally within that marketplace. But we need to fundamentally change our approach to that marketplace. And I am looking forward to working with the business community, whether it's group health care plans, whether it's banding together and other approaches, so long as we maintain robust coverage for workers and employees, that we can work together to drive down costs. I'm in, and I'm game, I'm looking forward to driving it.
So the elephant in the room when it comes to healthcare is to recognize that our healthcare system in this country is a for-profit entity. We tell the truth. And since healthcare is a for-profit entity, we're going to always have this problem. For 8 years in the House, we tried to pass Medicaid expansion so that 400,000 Virginians could have access to healthcare. The political side of it changed, and the bill was passed. And let me tell you why it was passed. Because of the politics. When our colleagues on the other side of the aisle thought that the numbers were going to change, they came back with the intent to pass Medicaid expansion. That was the only reason. They didn't come back, we didn't come back to drive down costs, because the way you drive down costs is to take benefits away. Look at your own health care and how much you pay. We are privileged up here because we are on the state plan. If we were not on the state plan, it would be costing us several $100s a month for health care. It is a for-profit entity, and until we change that, we're not going to do any of us any good favors at all. And I am so disturbed by that, because there are people who cannot afford health care, and they will not go to the hospital because they cannot afford it. And if we really want to be bold, we really must address it and be very truthful about it. Someone making $25,000 a year cannot afford health care. And as long as this is a for-profit entity, we're going to have a serious problem in our country and in our state.
Thank you. I did want to respond specifically to the Affordable Care Act. The research that we have, that we've seen right from the business community, is that the plans are not in direct competition with the individual marketplace of the Affordable Care Act.
The ACA, what is disturbing with these candidates on the national level, they want to come up with all these new plans. It took so many years just to get a plan in place. Don't try to reinvent something. Improve on what we have. That's all we need to do. Look at what we have, improve on that, and do not threaten to take away people's choice. Because whatever they come up with, healthcare for all, they're going to take away somebody's choice. And all they need to do is to work on improving what we have in place, because it took years to get the ACA. Now let's just work on improving it.
Thank you. Delegate-Elect Helmer. First, I'd like to thank you for your service to our country. Access to a skilled workforce continues to be a tremendous need for our local employers. We are severely lacking technicians, mechanics, welders, electricians, traditional trades to fill the onslaught of jobs being created by companies like Micron Technology, Boeing, and Amazon. What programs and initiatives will you support, like the expansion of career and technical education, public-private partnerships, or the reintegration and up-certification of veterans, to ensure we are creating sustainable talent pipelines?
Thanks. It's a great question, and one that we should all be concerned about. Folks are talking about the national stage, we should be talking about locally, as automation, as changes in the workforce take place, increasingly your ability to operate within that work. But both as businesses, we're going to require a technically and effectively educated workforce. And in order to have sustainable levels of employment here, we're going to have folks who have access to that education. Now, I would offer, and what would probably be an unpopular sentiment here, is that one of the reasons that we are lacking technical education in the trades is that we, as a anti-union commonwealth, have undermined one of the most effective training pipelines for those who are able to act in the trade workforce. Apprenticeship programs by the carpenters, by the electricians, by other trade unions have been very effective elsewhere in the country at providing a technically, effectively educated workforce that can do things like build clean rooms for a place like Micron, that can work on very specific specifications that help us operate, and can deal with workforce shortages in areas like construction where we're struggling right now to keep up with demand, driving up the cost for all of us. So there are two sides to the cost equation on labor. When you drive down the cost of labor so much that you can't then attract the labor, you're going to pay for it somewhere. So encouraging unions to get engaged in workforce training here, as well as looking at how we do technical certification with military veterans leaving the military, and making sure that if you drove a deuce and a half, a 2.5 ton truck in the military, we give you a commercial driver's license here in Virginia, looking at how we make sure that military spouses aren't impacted by different certification requirements, are all components of it, and certainly making significant and major investments in technical education at some of our wonderful state schools like George Mason University.
So I hired a Navy kid as my LA, and I can tell you that when you talk to military families especially, you will hear that transferability of skill sets is such a huge deal when we're talking exactly about what Delegate-Elect Helmer was talking about here in terms of licensing, for example, that if you were a teacher in Washington State, if you were a teacher in another state, that you should be able to teach in Virginia with as little pain as possible, especially because your spouse or your parent or whoever it is serving abroad, and that requires you to be transferring state to state to state. At the same time, we also see that we have a problem in terms of educational credit transfers for military families as well. And this means that if you're going to college in another state, or you're going to a higher learning institute, wherever it is in another state, or even if you're just doing your K-12 even, and you're in high school, then when you are then transferred here somewhere in Virginia, not all of those credits come along with you every single time. If you want to support our military, support our military families, it is wildly important. At the same time, when we're talking about career technical education, one of the problems that we have in Manassas Park, for example, as I've talked to the CT teacher actually at Manassas Park, is a lack of physical space within the building at the high school to adequately train a number of people who are going to go directly into the workforce. Because even though we will still have a lot of students from Manassas Park High School who will go into, who will go to Nova or who will go into college, a lot of students from Manassas Park High School must be labor ready by the time that they get out. And so if I've got folks over at IBEW Local 26 in the 13th District off of Falls Ford Road telling me that, hey, we can keep, not only can we keep these young adults out of debt, but at the same time, we will pay them $20 an hour to learn the trade, and then we'll pay them $25 an hour starting salary when they're actually out on the workforce. That's fantastic. And the more I can encourage that, the more I'm going to.
So I would start by sharing with you the legislation that was able to pass this year that would help military spouses when they are transitioning to Virginia. If they are nurses, the recertification process is going to change now. In the past, the process didn't have a timeline. It would take up to a year. So now any military spouse who is a nurse and moves to Virginia, the recertification process will take only 30 days because they need to join the workforce immediately. As far as veterans, I think I have the largest population of veterans in my district as I represent the Potomac area with Montclair and Ashland and Independent Hill. So I have held two veteran town halls with the Prince William County delegation, and we have been working closely with Secretary Hopkins to address the needs that were mentioned earlier. It's a reality that we need more support systems to provide resources to our veterans to transition to the civilian world. It is necessary. We're trying to find resources. Right now, for example, one of the things that have been addressed during these town halls was the lack of assessments when veterans are discharged, honorably or dishonorably. So we don't know what are the resources that they need, but that will take federal legislation. We have also, I have my notes here. We have also addressed the need for children. You know, when children are moving from places to places, we must provide the support systems for them so they could, accommodate on these new environments when they are changing from a state to state and they never have stability. So with that, we have provided more school counselors. We need more money, and I will ask the chairman of appropriations to allocate that money for those school counselors so we can go down to 250. Thank you.
I guess you all see what kind of problem we have. Consider this. The unemployment rate in the Commonwealth of Virginia is 2.6%. 2.6%. And we still have jobs that we are unable to fill. That's an amazing problem to have. We are moving from our traditional workforce design where our kids go off to college, then they graduate and come out with a skill set, and then they are employed. We have a different kind of workforce now, in my opinion, that is much more specialized, where we're going to be moving away from the traditional sense of how we educate and train and be a lot more specific. That's where we need your help. That's where I need your help. You give me the suggestions and the ideas that you think will work. We can't come up with all that stuff. You guys are business owners. You have to tell us what you need. And then if there's legislation that is needed to appropriate and to meet the need, then we submit that legislation so that we can support your efforts and what your concerns are. I often tell my constituents when I meet with them, you give me your concerns. Tell me what your concerns are. And then that is how I build legislation. I'm not the brightest guy in the room, don't pretend to be, but I think I have a little bit of wisdom. And part of my wisdom is that, come talk to me, share with me what your challenges are and the ways that you think we can fix those challenges. But to have a 2.6% unemployment rate and to have jobs that we still cannot fill, what a great problem to have in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
For questions, I heard choice come up several times. So this next question, and Delegate Roem, I'm going to start with you, is related to the Commonwealth right to work laws. There's been much speculation that the new majorities in both houses may result in concerted efforts to repeal the Commonwealth right to work laws. Virginia was just recently awarded the #1 state to do business by CNBC, due in part to its right to work status. Do you support maintaining the Commonwealth status and ensure employer choice? If not, why?
In 2016, I joined a majority of the 13th district residents in voting against the constitutional amendment that would have enshrined so-called right to work into the state constitution. And if you want to call it by its other term, which is a freeloader term, then fine, you can do that as well. At the same time, I also know that this is going to be a chief policy position for Delegate Carter. And so if you want to talk to the person who's going to be leading on that issue in the House, please by all means talk to our colleagues in the city of Manassas. In the meantime, I'm going to be making sure that I'm continuing to expand Omni rides, and I'm going to make sure that I'm continuing to find a cost-effective way to expand the VRE out to Gainesville, for example. I'm going to do a lot of things that people in this room are going to be really, we're going to be able to work collaboratively with when it comes to transportation, when it comes to education, when it comes to making sure that every person who lives here can actually have health care. And at the same time, if the bill came up on the House floor, I know I would be following the will of the people of the 13th district by voting for it. And when we're dealing with the choice part of this, that was already vetted when we were doing our chamber interview. I already discussed this with Ross and with the other people here who were on that call, where we talked about what existing precedent do we have from other states where this has created a problem, right? And if we're talking about that #1 rating, well, let's talk about the rating we got from Oxfam. And because of the right to, so-called right to work that we had here, we were ranked 51st, dead last in the country. How did we fall behind Mississippi, Virginia? How's that possible? We fell behind West by God, Virginia again. How is that possible? I've lived here my whole life. I
gotta say something about West Virginia.
It's very pretty. So with that, I will turn it over to the delegate from, I believe, Charlestown.
I think Virginia spoke loudly, and it is time for us to reject old notions that say being best for business means being worse for workers. I think we didn't just have an election in which a chamber-endorsed candidate who was endorsed in part because of his position on so-called right to work lost decisively. But we had an opportunity, right? I ran against somebody at the chamber endorsed who said, the main reason for doing it was because he was going to support right to work laws here. The reality is that we talked through Virginia, as I talked to my district, we do see a two-track economy in which women, minorities, and many of our veterans have been left behind, in which wages are not living wages. And we need to fix that. And what we need is the cooperation of the business community and the thoughtfulness of the business community and how we get there. And so rather than perceiving a desire to make sure we lift people out of poverty and recognize the dignity of work as a threat, I think all of us here as hardworking people, many of us who run businesses, need to talk together about how is it that we create an economy that works for all of us? And it is that I'm going to be fighting for in the General Assembly, so that every Virginian who works in this Commonwealth has the opportunity to live in dignity. And getting rid of laws that inhibit the ability of people to collectively bargain for their wages is one of the ways in which we're going to ensure that we no longer have a two-track economy and that wages and benefits keep up with the growth of the economy, and that a 2% unemployment rate means that people are able to live in dignity.
So I'd like to look at the data of the statement that you made about being the number one business is because of we are right to work state. I think that underestimate the amount of work that businesses have put in place to retain their employees. So I don't know, I've never seen that data. I would like to see it. If you would like to share it with all of us, we definitely would like to see it. I think that we have great businesses in Virginia, and I would doubt that it's because of that. Now, we have to recognize that we do live in a state where we are at will employment, and that is not right. It's like we have to revise those pieces of legislation. Now, I'm not introducing the right to work state, repealing the right to work bill, if that's for, disclosure, I'm not. But I do think, I'm a union member, and this is also information that is publicly available. and my union represents the state, federal, and county employees. And what I joined a union is because it's important for me when we have to negotiate our salaries, when we have to negotiate our benefits, when we have to know about the trainings that we need as an employee. What it means is one of us will have a seat at the table and talk when these decisions are made. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful when you are running an organization that is running on inclusiveness, to have one person on your workforce sit at the table so they can have a voice on deciding what is best for them and for your business? And that's what I was about. Thank you.
Right to work is a real big political issue. Really big in its own. A great deal of politics. If you want transparency, that's the deal with the whole issue. You know, I see what you have here. You would like us to maintain right to work. There are other folks who would like to see that changed. I would tell you that the current administration has issues with overturning or repealing right to work. Members in the Senate have some issues with it. And there are members in the House who also have issues with it. Some want to get rid of it, some do not. The governor has great concern with doing away with right to work. And so what I'll share with folks is that people need to get in the room, they need to have a discussion, allow their concerns to be voiced, and move away from always having absolutes. Because things are fixable if people are willing to get in the room and have a conversation and really find out what are the real issues. Once the real issues have been identified, then there are solutions to them. But oftentimes we want to deal in absolutes, and absolutes are not always the answer. But I will tell you, going into the 2020 session, it is going to be a very hot political issue.
We have repeatedly reached out to him, and he has consistently declined to participate and engage with the business community. So I'd now like to open it up for questions. I'm sorry? Two public questions.
Hi, New York is holding from Delegate, and I appreciate you, Delegate Torian, mentioning the unemployment rate at 2.6, and I can tell you that there's a solution to that problem, which is the 1/3 of people with disabilities who are currently participating in the workforce, but the 2/3 who are not. Virginia's 39th in its funding for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and there's a long way that we have to go, and over 10,000, 14,000 people are on the wait list right now waiting to work. It's a phenomenal workforce, it's an untapped talent that we're not utilizing, and I think it's a big issue for us in this state. What are some of the solutions that we propose to increase the engagement of people with disabilities?
So I actually introduced legislation last year, and my bill was not heard on the Republican majority. I was told that I already passed bills and they were enough, and I had to wait for the next legislative session. But I'm coming back and I'm bringing my legislation. We will include hiring preferences for people with disabilities at the state level. It's a program that is already implemented at the federal government, and it will provide hiring preferences when people can do the job, intellectually, but just the disability is not on the way to perform that job, and they will provide additional points during the interview when they're gonna go and apply for state employment.
The only thing I want to share is that you and I probably need to sit down and talk, because I don't, you have a level of insight and expertise that I do not have that would help me tremendously. Because I really, when we talk about the workforce, that's a population of our citizens in our community that we very rarely think about. And so you help us.
Well, I just want to point out that oftentimes people consider people who are born with disability and not acquired disability. Disability can happen to any of us at any time, a stroke, a heart attack, a car accident. So this affects us keeping and containing our own employment as well as supporting all of the people in our community to be inclusive.
Just add that I'd be very excited to carry on the conversation. My business partner lost his leg in Afghanistan, acquired disability, right? So this issue I'm personally passionate about. It runs a huge spectrum. It is a cross-disciplinary issue. Things like a low minimum wage actually discourage people with disabilities at times from being able to enter the workforce, right? Because the trade-off there's a trade-off in benefits. And so there are all sorts of things we need to look at structurally to encourage people and recognize the incredible benefit that we get from providing opportunities for those with disabilities to enter the workforce and the unique perspective. Too often I hear from this like, hey, I would love to find people with disabilities, but I gotta accommodate them. And actually the reality is that by bringing in folks with a diverse perspective, including those with disabilities, you empower and you create a better workforce that is more able to serve a more diverse customer base that represents more of what Virginia is. So I think there's real power in making sure we give opportunities to folks with disabilities, and it's not just a disadvantage that we need to address from a business perspective. I think we need to change that framework.
So I want to mention a few things here. Number one, a member of my immediate family actually went through the Independence Empowerment Center, by the way, and taking care of them, taking care of the folks over the Arc of Prince William, Arc of Northern Virginia, those are passion projects. And so if you want to follow up offline with that, please by all means, let's talk about it. Because as Dale was talking about his business partner being an amputee, I put in a bill the last 2 years that would require insurers to have to cover the cost for mechanical prosthetic devices for amputees, for example. Because one of my constituents, she's missing her arm on her dominant arm below her right elbow. And, she was actually the first person in the entire state to be enrolled in Medicaid expansion, by the way. And so I want to make sure that all of my constituents who are amputees, for example, have the ability to have all 4 limbs, right? Because it's not just a physical health issue, this is a mental health issue, and at the same time, it also is what allows her to be able, it would allow her to be able to drive a car, to be able to go back to work. She has a lot of different jobs that she wants to do. She wants to work in corrections, for example, and she can't do right now. So making sure that our insurers actually provide for people with ongoing disabilities especially is widely important. And I was one of the delegates in 2018 who introduced legislation to eliminate the age cap for autism-related healthcare, for example. And this year, we all got passed, the folks sitting at this table, we got passed the bill that eliminated all age restrictions on autism-related healthcare, because autism doesn't go away when you turn 11. It didn't make any sense about why we'd actually have an age cap on that to begin with. And so I'll just say, if you want to follow up offline, my chief staff right behind you, and I'd be very, very happy to work with you on this show.
One more question? Mr. Doing.
I'm pretty loud.
You're pretty loud.
So some 10, 12 years ago, when Senator Colgan became Senate Finance Committee Chair, I had the opportunity to ask this question, and now I get to dump it in the lap of Delegate Torian. But the question goes out to everybody. Any early comments you want to make about budget amendments that we might see coming forward that will impact the business community here in Prince William County and the city of Manassas?
Marty, we have not begun to develop the legislative priorities from appropriation standpoint. Let me just take a moment to share with you where we are with the Democrats, with us coming in the majority, and obviously a lot of changes that are going to take place, and where we are right now, certainly on appropriations, making some decisions relative to staffing, getting organized is a huge job just to do that. I'm not even, right now, I I am overwhelmed, to be honest with you, with just the transition itself, taking on a new role, learning that new role. I will tell you that it's great to be in a position where we can help Prince William. It's good to be in that position and learning what that means and how we will be able to financially allow our county to benefit. You all helped me with budget recommendations. You all are in the weeds in the community from an economic development standpoint and things that you may see that financially we can take to Richmond as budget amendments and then perhaps have some favorable results. I've always said that inclusiveness for me is important. I don't have all the answers, you know, but if you're in a position, when you are in a position, you allow that position to work for others. And so, you know, I will tell you, it's humbling to be in the position, but it's also overwhelming right now as we seek the transition. But I've always, the way that I've developed legislation, the way that I put in budget amendments is that when we have these legislative meetings, lunches, breakfasts, what have you, hearing from you all helps me when I go back to Richmond. That's been my approach.
If I may, and that judicious nature is exactly why I think you're the man for the job.
So budget amendments, but I haven't spoken with the chair of appropriations yet. They don't want to be in trouble here. But I think that's something that is very important, that it's a need right now in Prince William County. It's for the disability community, the amount of DD waivers. There is a huge amount of waiting lists, so we are hopeful that we can get more money for DD waivers. Another appropriation piece is going to be the transportation part. I strongly believe that if we boost our local transportation system, we can have more businesses establishing in Prince William County, so I'm sure that will be a priority as well, as it was mentioned. Talking about healthcare, it was addressed, I mean, in a few comments a few minutes ago about the amount of people that have not been having access, being eligible, but they are not taking advantage of either Medicaid or the marketplace. We are in conversations right now with the administration, or maybe include that question when you are filing your state taxes. If you present a form where you are uninsured, or you are paying the fine for not having insurance, we can update that tax form to ask that question and provide, you can opt in, and we can provide you information, send your information to the state or the marketplace so you can get access to healthcare insurance and be pre-screened for that. And I think that's what I can think of right now as far as money. I will leave it there.
So Supervisor Noe, what I'll just mention to you here is, and for everyone in the room here, is my top funding priority is going to make sure that we are taking care of the MBTA. Because I recognize the void that we have without us having the chairman of the MBTA being from Prince William County. And I'm going to be making sure that we have a constant voice in the majority caucus for fully funding the MBTA and taking care of our regional transportation needs, both in Prince William County and throughout all 9 jurisdictions that make up Planning District 8, because this is the time, whereas I was talking about before, we have a pro-transportation majority. It is time for us to fully fund transportation, especially in the economic engine that drives Virginia, which is Northern Virginia. This is not an option for us. It is mandatory for us. We have to get this done. And I want to remind folks here that we lost out on the FBI headquarters relocation in the first round, before they ultimately pulled the plug on the whole thing. We lost out in the first round because we did not have Metro Rail out to Innovation Park. With one word change in the federal level from Metro Rail to commuter rail, if we had VRE to Innovation Park, we could have made a hell of a competitive case for that. And we can also, by taking care of Longbridge in particular, I will tell you the most important rail thing that we can possibly do in the state is both fix the existing problems we have in Longbridge as well as dealing with the widening for the basically so that you have one freight line and you have one commuter line. If we take care of that, we're gonna be able to up ferry service here considerably, because when we were looking at a $660 million price tag to bring the ferry 11 miles out to Haymarket, I don't blame the Board of County Supervisors at that point for instead just opting to expand the Block 1 station. At the same time, I'll just tell you from going door to door to door to door to door in Haymarket and Gainesville, my constituents wanted here. The data that came back to the county does not comply with the reality that I got from talking to my constituents on a day-to-day basis at the doors who are asking me, when are we gonna get this? We have to get this. And that means fully funding the RPT and at the same time taking care of our roads too by never gutting our road funding from the MBTA.
So what Danica said on the MBTA and mass transit is, I 100% agree that we need to identify creative revenue sources. We need to look at the cost side of the equation as well to make sure that we're investing in transportation architecture that allows us to spend more time with our families, have employees work closer, live closer to where they work, and encourage folks to basically make sure that our infrastructure works for us. As Indiana, we talked a lot about the concerns of the chamber. I'm very concerned about the growth of small businesses and innovation and the workforce here in Northern Virginia and in Virginia as a whole. And so I want to look at budgetary options to increase the availability of capital and funding for small businesses engaged in innovative technology solutions for issues of major importance, from IT to AI to clean energy. And we need to become the clean energy and technology hub, not just of the region, but of the country, by creating access to capital that makes sense for small businesses to grow here and lead. And so that's where I'd like us to go as well.
And I think that we have a follow-up.
So we just completed, the Appropriations Committee, we just completed 2 days of meetings down in North. One of the things, one of the forecasts, and for those of you, all of you who are in the business community, probably see this. Right now, we're moving along at a pretty decent pace. But potentially, the growth is going to slow down. You know, maybe next year, maybe a couple of years from now, 2 or 3 years from now. But at the level where we are now, the forecast is that our economy is going to slow down. So what do we do from an appropriation standpoint? We put money in the reserve so that when the economy shifts, we are not adversely impacted. We have the rainy day fund, and then we created a new reserve fund where we're seeking to increase that funding to about $3 billion so that when the economy changes, Virginia is not adversely impacted. You know, until you sit in those seats where you see these things, we can talk about spending, funding, but my job and our job is to help protect your quality of life. That's what we're there for. That's what I'm there for. And so when we see these trends that are coming, it is our job as leaders to be prepared for those trends when they come our way.
I think we have time for us one more question.
Thank you, Ross. I appreciate it. I'm Rick Daly, Supervisor-elect for the Potomac District. And I think that, just briefly, this is such a wonderful opportunity for us as our chairman, our newly elected chairman for the Appropriations Committee has said, and that we are transitioning into change, and no one likes to change. But I look at the supervisor's position as a bridge builder, if you will, in supporting the business community, supporting the constituents, but being a bridge builder to the delegate, the governors for the General Assembly. And so my question with all of that said, because this is such a great opportunity, is what can we do as a new body coming into our roles? Because it is overwhelming, but it is an opportunity. And it's based upon building the trust and the respect within the community. What can we do to support a better Virginia being in the seat, coming into the seat?
First, I just want to mention here that I am so excited to work with our new Prince William Board of County Supervisors and all the members of the board, because we're not going to have the acrimonious relationship that we've seen before. We're not going to have the antagonistic relationship that we've seen before. I have complete confidence that Ian Wheeler is never going to show up in front of the General Assembly waving a roll of toilet paper. Like, I am completely confident that we are going to have adults sitting at the table and actually talking in good faith with each other to make sure that we are taking care of Prince William County and that we are not jeopardizing Prince William's status within the General Assembly by insulting members of the majority party while we're doing it, let alone the minority party, by the way. We're not going to get into that business either. We're going to have a functional working relationship, and to Supervisor Bailey, even if you are on the eastern end and I'm on the western end, you are welcome in the office of the 13th District anytime. And I'll be happy to meet you in your Potomac District office as well, because as far as I'm concerned, taking care of Dumfries, taking care of Route 1 corridor, that is a Prince William County issue. Whether or not it's on the western end or the eastern end, we have to work together. And we have to work together in good faith so that our constituents trust us to get the job done, and that because Prince William now has incredible clout with Delegate Torian being chair of the Appropriations Committee, we're not going to be treated as a laughing stock of Virginia this time around. It's not going to happen. We've seen it on the House floor. We have seen Prince William County be called out on the House floor for bad behavior. That's not going to happen anymore. Now we're going to be in a really good place where we are going to be inclusive of our majority community. We're going to welcome you because of who you are, not despite it, and that goes for no matter what you look like, where you come from, how you worship if you do, or who you love. That when you were in Prince William County, when you were in Virginia, welcome. We're glad you're here.
I'm very excited to work with all the members of the Board of Supervisors, and I echo what Danica said, although I'm looking forward to the moment in which you lay in your own constructing the scenario upon which that was appropriate. So I don't know that I share your view on that. But to the broader point, I think, look, it is a new day in Prince William County. We have real opportunities to invest smartly, create a regulatory and legal framework that incorporates Prince William not as a stepchild disassociated from Northern Virginia, but as a full member of the family that is welcomed into the economic growth and benefits of our adjacent counties that I think in some cases we have missed out on those opportunities. I'm sitting down with Supervisor Camlin next week. I don't think these are partisan issues. I think they are issues in which we all need to work together and where we need your help, which was what you asked, is to articulate the vision of what that looks like for all of our constituents here to support the needs of a broad and diverse group of people, our business community, our working families, folks of every single race and religion, and the incredible diversity that makes this county a great one. And so where I look forward to working with all of you is to hearing what you're hearing, understanding what the needs of our community are, and to begin that process of truly integrating Prince William County into an engine that joins the rest of the pistons that are pumping in Northern Virginia and really grows alongside of it in a way that works for every single member of the community. So that's what I'm excited about.
Well, I would like to start first by acknowledging the years of service for County Supervisor Martinoy, my constituent. Thank you for your service. I would have to acknowledge that it's definitely someone that I will miss to work with. We had a great working relationship and excited about the future as well. You know, I definitely having conversations with the new county board of supervisors on transportation, public education, something that is so important right now for our communities, criminal justice reform, being able to have a public defender office right here in Prince William County. And I would like to conclude by saying, as an immigrant myself, there are so many immigrants who have chosen to establish in Prince William County. And it is my hope that this type of divisiveness and hate among communities trying to divide us is up to an end this December 31st. And we start brand new on January 1st, being proud of who we are, what we represent, and treat every single one of our constituents with dignity and respect. Thank you.
So, my advice to you and all the new members on the board, learn your county. Understand your county. The Board of County Supervisors have lost years of institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge matters when you're trying to govern. It is so extremely important that not only you learn the processes, but you learn the people. And you learn how to govern. And people may think that those just words, but it is truly a process to learn how to govern, to learn how to lead, and to receive the constructive criticism that you're going to be faced with. You cannot shut out people like Monty Noy. You should welcome him into your life. There's a level of institutional knowledge that he has that he can impart to you that's going to help you govern. Make no mistake about it. You all have targets on your back. You're responsible for leading our county, and you must lead it well. You must lead it well.